Well, they have the. We're on.
We're on. Well, welcome to the Friday Transportation Seminar at Portland State University. My name is Chris Munster. I'm a faculty in Civil and Environmental Engineering. We're very pleased today to have Peter Koonce from the City of Portland to talk about transforming traffic signals to support sustainability to talk to us today. We do broadcast this seminar live over the web. Those of you who attend hear this every time, but remember that if you ask a question, you have to use the microphone, so either press the touch button, this one's broken, till it lights up red and hold it down. Otherwise, we'll come around with the portable mic to allow you to ask questions. So without any more, I'm going to turn it over to Peter. Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Chris. Well, just last week I was in the back row and enjoyed the seminar. And I'm always impressed with the quality of the speakers of the seminar. And I think the multitude of technical things that are covered, it's one of the things I think that sets Portland State apart from other universities. And actually to webcast these, it's great. I know I have actually an intern that's watching it at the city right now. But you know, I've been impressed with this. While I've been impressed with the speakers, I'm questioning a little bit with the today's choice of speaker. I think the quality has just come down a little bit. So you guys have to work on that for next term. Seriously, I'm honored to be here. As Chris mentioned, I'm the manager of the Signals and Street Lighting and ITS group at the City of Portland. I've been doing that for about 15 months, but I've also been an adjunct faculty at Portland State for about the last 7 years. So it's been fun to stay engaged and talk a little bit about not only what's going on in the real world in the trenches in terms of engineering, but also to kind of look ahead. And so that's part of this presentation, is to talk a little bit about some of the ideas, the applications that we've done in Portland, because we've been doing some really good work, and it's way before I started. And then also the research needs as we go forward, as we think about transforming our traffic signals in support of sustainability. So let me just start by the disclaimer, of course. These are the views of Peter Koonce as opposed to the City of Portland. Now, most of the views are representative, but I just wanted to always put that out there. The overview of the presentation, I'll talk a little bit about the ideas. First, get into some example applications, and also get into the little bit of the riff we have with US DOT in terms of what those ideas and those policies are and how that fits within our applications, and then get into the research as we go. I'm a bit of a social media junkie. Facebook is one of those things, but this is a clip I took from Ray LaHood. And one of the things he says is that transportation is a public health issue, and DOT is doing its part to keep kids moving. And when I think a little bit about when I started, when I was in your seats as a student, I didn't really think too much about that. But that's something I think that's emerging, and I'll talk about throughout my presentation. So who do I work for as the City of Portland Bureau employee? And I think about Mayor Sam Adams, and the leader of Portland. He's the Transportation Commissioner. So that's really who I work for, and that's who signs my paychecks. But the real people I work for are the leaders of the Koonce household. And my wife in the background and my daughters are just now getting on their bikes, are really who I'm working for. And so I think about, you've probably heard about this designing from 8 to 80, and thinking about building our communities. That's my joke, as who I really work for. And really, in a lot of cases they want the same thing. And this is actually I was biking this last summer in the Rose Festival with the mayor, and Abby was there too. So really that same day, that day they wanted the exact same things. But here's a note from the mayor, and I thought this is very well stated, and I'll just read it. I hate when people read slides, but I think it's worthwhile, especially since it's a quote from the mayor. And he says that our intentions are to be as sustainable a city as possible. That means socially, that means environmentally, and that means economically. The bike is great on all three of those factors. You just can't get a better transportation return on your investment than you get with promoting cycling. And this was particularly devoted towards a cycling group. I mean, so you could say that about a lot of things. But I think that's one of those elements of how we're thinking about the future of transportation is thinking about it more in terms of a broad context as opposed to just basically working within what we have today. So, and I'll talk about that as I walk you through some of the policy directives and where we're coming from in terms of overall transportation. So it's not just the city, because we're the center of the universe, of course, in the City of Portland. But we have partners, and Metro, a key partner, they have a regional transportation plan. There's also the Multnomah County City of Portland Joint Climate Action Plan. The city's transportation system plan that includes the bike master plan, the freight master plan, all those different elements. And then even TriMet, our partners at TriMet, we got to think about how we move people as opposed to just cars. And so these are all a part of it. And then, of course, ODOT as well. They have their plans, and one of the great partnerships we have in Portland is with ODOT and transport as a regional ITS. So we make investments in the system within technology, considering all the users out there. But the Climate Action Plan is the one that comes to mind and is kind of bringing about brand and bold new change. And so this is something that they worked through, the county and the Bureau of Sustainability at the City of Portland, and started to think about what are the greenhouse gas emissions. Obviously, that's something that we haven't always tracked over time. It's not something that transportation has done a very good job with. But that's where we need to go to think about the challenges of the future. And one of those elements this plan talks about is emissions reductions goals. And so from a transportation perspective, the top of the slide, I think you might be able to read it, is transportation-related carbon emissions reductions goals. So where we are today is actually better than we were in '95, which is actually very surprising for a city the size of Portland that has grown, as most cities have increased their greenhouse gases. We've been working with all of our policies, and so there's, like I said, a lot of good work that's been done. But as you can see from this graph, we have a long ways to go to try to get to where we need to be in 2050 to meet the various goals that are set by the leadership. What is the bottom line? What does that mean for signals and street lighting? Well, $14 million is my budget, and half of that is paid for power for street lighting. Okay, so I write a check, a big check to PGE and Pacific Power every month. And a lot of that electricity comes from coal. Okay, so go back to those greenhouse gas emissions. Transportation, one of those factors is where we get the electricity. So the opportunity, and this is, I don't talk a lot about street lighting because signals is really my passion, but the opportunity is there to make significant changes in bringing in LEDs and other technology, making them more efficient fixtures, and thinking about adaptive lighting. Right now, you turn on the street light, and it's the same brightness from day one. We show the same power, and actually the reality of it is we should be doing better than that, right? At 3 in the morning, does it need to be as bright as it is at 8 p.m.? So that's something that we're working towards. But we haven't done that. We haven't gone to the effort of installing dimmers like you have in your household. But back to transportation, my true passion is in signals. And this is a good example of where transportation hierarchy exists. And the Climate Action Plan has this graphic, so I just borrowed it from that. And you've probably seen this in many different, if you've followed policy and planning. Pedestrians are at the top of the triangle. So we should prioritize pedestrians because everybody's a pedestrian at some point in their trip. And then bicycles, okay, bicycles, most efficient form of transportation. Public transit next. Commercial vehicles, high occupancy vehicles, and then finally single occupancy vehicles. And this is an intersection in downtown Portland where I would suggest that we've gotten it right. Okay, so pedestrians, we have sidewalks. They're not the widest sidewalks, but they're sidewalks, and this one's actually pretty good. Bicycles, we've put in a buffered bike lane. You heard about that last week and how effective that has been. Okay, we could do better, but we at least have allocated the space. Public transit, light rail intersecting the street, that's not bad, right? It's not a subway system, but pretty good. Commercial vehicles, we have parking here. High occupancy vehicles, we'll just throw that in with transit. And then finally, single occupancy vehicles. We have 1 lane for single occupancy vehicles. So this picture is the embodiment of that pyramid. Now, have we done that everywhere? No, but is this a good example of where we're going to go? I think so. I'd suggest it is. And where are we going? So that's the crux of the issue. And this comes, again, from the Climate Action Plan. So this really does provide us with a target to shoot at in terms of the transportation. The current mode split for Portland is a 66% drive alone, 15% transit, 4% walk, 8% bike. Okay? So if you look ahead to 2030, huge increases in bikes. We want to go 3 times as many bikes we want to half the drivers, okay, and we want to increase transit. So that's the direction we're going. How do we get there? How do the traffic signals, how do the intersections that we have change to meet those goals? Because those are laudable goals. Those are huge changes, and we got to think about that in terms of the overall urban context. The Climate Action Plan was not very specific related to traffic signals. I don't know why. Not everybody thinks about traffic signals like I do. But the closest goal was urban form and mobility. Okay, so that's where I put my eggs in that basket in transportation, and thinking about creating vibrant 20-minute neighborhoods. How do we do that? Reducing VMT, improving efficiency of freight movement, and other non-transportation operations objectives. So all those various elements, I want to talk about this first one. How are we creating 20-minute urban neighborhoods? Specifically with our traffic signals. So here's today's intersection. Okay, this is, again, not downtown, so this is kind of a typical intersection. Anybody know where this is? 72nd and Sandy. Dave Kraut gets a gold star today. So, this is a neglected old highway. We've got all these orphaned highways where, it's 2 lanes in each direction, no center turn lane. So we didn't, back 40, 50 years ago, didn't care so much about safety. We don't need that. No bike lanes. The pedestrian environment's pretty poor. We got these goalposts, different poles put up. We even put the cabinet in the way so we can give you like an urban obstacle course, because that's what everybody really wants. That's the reality. That's the majority of intersections are like this. Now I think about tomorrow's intersection, a lot more activity, a lot more bikes. Okay, this is actually a tour de lab from last year. So, this could be tomorrow's intersection. But thinking about it in terms of how we're mixing these bikes up and thinking about, okay, now do we do something differently with the traffic signal than we would do if we're back here where it's very auto-dominated? Okay. And I think about the intersection for 2030 where it's all bikes. Everybody's biking and we have no problem. Well, that's probably not what we're going to get to. That's probably a little bit higher than 30% mode split, but you get my point. So we have these obstacles, though, that are in our way, and federal requirements. And the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices is the document that I refer to most as our most favorite document. And one of my favorite lines from that document is that adequate roadway capacity should be provided at a signalized intersection. Adequate roadway capacity. What does that mean? Well, it means that we should never have failure, right? We should never, and if you read the Highway Capacity Manual as well, it's focusing on the needs of automobiles as opposed to all users. And non-standard treatments in the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control, if it isn't in that document, you need to go through this experimentation process where it's closely scrutinized with what you do. And that's really a question of how easy is it to innovate? How easy can we just go and look to try to do new solutions? And my case in point is the city and FHWA. We have pedestrian crossing signals. We have had half signals for a long time. And we look at the Guide for Design of Ped Bike Facilities. That's one document that we can go to look at what we should be doing. And then there's also, of course, the manual itself. And so thinking about how we focus on improving crossing opportunities for pedestrians is very important to us if we're trying to create that 20-minute neighborhood so that people can walk to go get a gallon of milk as opposed to burning a gallon of fuel to go get a gallon of milk. And the half signals and the pedestrian hybrid signals, those are 2 examples that I'll talk to and what we have out there. Here's one of my heroes, Ray LaHood. Okay, great policy directives that come down, but the one challenge is those policy directives, and here's what he said, is treat walking and bicycling as equals with other transportation modes, go beyond minimum design standards, and improve non-motorized facilities during maintenance projects. Okay, so those 3 things are right from Ray LaHood. Okay, those 3 things are there. The challenge is they're not in the manual. The policies lead the documentation. And that's further exacerbated by views of the staff and the history and our experience. So half signals, here's an example. If you're not familiar with a half signal, it's a full signal for vehicles. This is 16th and Hawthorne. Some of you have just recently looked at this as one of your Portland State students in one of your classes. So here's the full signal. And on the side street, we have just pedestrian indications. So that's a half signal because we only have half the normal signal heads that you would otherwise have. Okay. In typical Portland, we have a stack of tiny small bikes there. But what is a half signal? So FHWA is determined unsafe. Okay, so if you're a motorist on that side street, you don't have any indication of what the main street is doing. So these have been outlawed for 30 years. Okay, they should be removed. But we want to create that 20-minute neighborhood. We want people to cross the street. So removing it, obviously there's an expense of that, but is it going to be safer is the question. So we've wondered, what is that research based on? Why remove the intersection that's there today? And how does the federal government provide us with flexibility to meet those local policies? And what are the safety benefits for future mode split targets? So all those questions, again, come from that top-down approach of you need to remove it because it's unsafe. Well, that hasn't been our experience. So how do we relate our experience to that federal policy and think about the cost benefits of doing something like that? Okay. So the replacement for that is the HAWK signal, or the pedestrian hybrid beacon. Okay, this is essentially what is now in the manual of uniform traffic control devices to replace those, provide people an opportunity to cross at intersections, busy streets. And similar to a half signal, so this is what you would see is the mast arm on in the signals for the major street, and this is 41st and Burnside, so this is Burnside here. This is my intern, Jenna, from the summer. Say hi to Jenna. She did a little bit of research to figure out, and this is the pedestrian indication, and we also have a bike signal at this indication. And this is, again, an example where we had to ask for experimentation to do this. So this wasn't, again, in the manual. We couldn't just go out and say, this is an engineering solution that we want to try here, or that we wanted to apply here. We had to go get special permission to make that crossing happen. And the challenge is, we've gotten a few of these. Tucson put them out. Tucson, Arizona was a very strong leader in this, put them out at various, I think, over 60 intersections. And then after the fact, really designed them so that they wouldn't be increasing vehicle delay. And then Federal Highway Administration came in and said, well, you shouldn't put them in intersections. But if you think about the need, especially on a bicycle boulevard where you have a longer travel, putting it mid-block and having a bike on the sidewalk for 150 feet away from the intersection is not necessarily something that would be conducive to encouraging bicycle travel. So we have wanted to leave these as they are at intersections and use the half signals as well. And the question we have to ask is this better than the half signals that are there? So one of the research elements, and I've sent a draft over to Chris, he's going to be working on this, is documenting what the half signals, how well they performed, and have we had any problems with them. And then pedestrian bicycle prioritization. Here's an example. This is actually downtown Baltimore. Sorry, it's an older picture, where we've restricted this right turn, and we have this walk indication up. So we give pedestrians an opportunity. If you've ever walked in Baltimore, Eric probably can speak to this, you may not have the same experience you have in downtown Portland. So we want to lead pedestrian intervals to provide and elevate the pedestrian, give them a safer crossing. But there's a lot of research questions in this. You know, where do we apply these? And what are the safety benefits? These documentation elements that we've applied them. We have 10 in Portland, but we haven't gone back and looked at what are those elements. So we have the idea. We've applied it. Now the missing link is where you all come in. Portland State is we need the research to support where do we do these in the future. Do we do them everywhere? Does that meet the goals and the policies that have been set forth? And again, what are the benefits of doing so? Another one, passive pedestrian detection. This is in a very early stage. And again, one of those things that I inherited as I came into the role. And the role is, well, vehicles aren't forced to push a button. Why should pedestrians be? You know, so if you think about the pedestrian at the intersection, we can detect them just like we detect cars if we have a sensor that's looking down at the pedestrian. So a new innovative thing to do, and maybe extend the green. So if you have a pedestrian that's walking a little bit slower, perhaps extend the green And so you don't bring up a conflicting movement that could cause a pedestrian crash. And obviously, you've probably seen the statistics from last year, the pedestrian fatalities. We have a lot of room for improvement throughout the state. So we're doing some of that work. We're doing some of that work now. And again, early on in the stages, the question becomes, where do we apply these and what's the safety benefit? Okay, downtown signal timing is something everybody in the room has experienced, and fun little documentation piece. We have what's the adage in planning is one-way streets are inherently good or bad? How many think good? How many think bad? Oh, I think good. It depends, right? It depends. It's not that easy. The answer, I think, in downtown Portland's a good example. This is they're good. They can be really good. What we've done in downtown Portland is we have a one-way regular grid street system. We have signal cycle lengths that are very short. And why is that good? Well, it means that the pedestrian indications are always coming up. And then we have this element of quarter cycle offsets where you progress down, but you're progressed at a speed that's comfortable for vehicles and bikes as long as the vehicles figure it out. So 12 to 16 miles an hour is our progression speed in downtown Portland. And we have a reverse progression of 4 miles an hour or thereabouts for pedestrians. So how do we do that? Well, we set up so that one direction of travel. So here's your vehicle. It's one way. Okay, you can walk both ways, but you're one-way travel going up the screen. So you leave here, you get there. If you travel at 13 miles an hour in the PM peak hour, you're golden. You will never stop. Okay, I freak my wife out when I'm driving downtown Portland. She's like, you have to stop, you have to stop. I was like, no, I don't. I know the speed. So there's a little trick for you. 12.7 miles an hour is the number one way to go in downtown Portland. Okay? The trade-off of that, and if you think about it, what we're trying to do in downtown Portland is trying to create a safe pedestrian environment. The safest pedestrian environment is the slowest vehicle environment. Okay? So part of that then is if you walk opposite of the traffic signals. So the traffic signal, one-way street, is going up the screen. As a pedestrian, you can walk against the flow of traffic on the sidewalk, please. Not in the lanes of travel. We're not there yet. Okay? But the speed is actually 4.2 miles an hour. So if you're going to go slow and stroll, you're not going to make all the signals. But if you pick it up a little bit, you'll be great. So if you take away one lesson from today, this is it. Walk against the flow of traffic. Okay, what else are we doing? Innovations in ped-bike control. This is, of course, one, the cycle track and the launch pad, of course, for making that left turn. We can go beyond that. We can think about European practices and having been to Europe a couple times, have an opportunity to look at, well, actually, they can provide better information. What do? We count down pedestrians to help them get out of the intersection, and so we encourage them to run across. Well, in Germany, they do the opposite. They tell you how long it's going to be until we give you green. So grün in is green in. So it's a countdown that tells you when it's going to be okay to walk. So what does that do? Well, it encourages people to wait. Hopefully, it actually is a tattletale if you think about it. If the engineers have made you wait for 80 seconds, maybe it's time to change the signal timing, right? Maybe that means they're wrong as opposed to you've been fooled into waiting for a time when it's safe to cross. So think about that in terms of flipping things, and that's one of the elements that in the U.S. I think we thought in this school of thought for so long, we have to think about if we're going to get to those mode split targets, we have to think more broadly and think about what have the Europeans done to get to where they are today. The bike box, another good example of what we're doing. We borrowed that from European practice. Commonplace, increases the visibility for cyclists in intersections, and increases the efficiency for heavily trafficked locations. If you can get 10 cyclists in this bike box, then that's going to improve the efficiency, right? So if we get to that 30% mode split target, we're going to need that sort of room to provide the movement of bicycles as opposed to just that one car that's sitting there 15 feet back. Another element that's not in the MUTCD is a bicycle signal. Right? We've pioneered these. We have 6 of them now in Portland. We try to give good information about how to use them, and then hopefully that display is intuitive. I've had arguments that people suggest that, well, I didn't understand that it was a bike, and so I think we've tried our level best to say bike signal and have this display. But we can do more, and I'll show you an example of that here. And then lastly, bike detection. Again, it's one of those things where this is our common detection for vehicles. We put in loop detectors, and we detect metal that comes across the intersection. So this is Southwest Barber and Hamilton here on the side street. And we put in all this bike detection, and this is a new intersection where we actually put in detector here for bikes. Okay, we put in advanced detectors, that's what these are here for cars, but then we also put in an advanced detector for bikes. But this is not the norm. Of our 1,070 intersections, there's only about 50 of these that have treated bikes similarly to how we've treated cars. So in a lot of cases with bike detection, we are not treating them as equals. We're asking them to push the button as opposed to just being detected like a regular vehicle would. A regular vehicle. See, my terminology is even poor. Like a motorized vehicle would. Okay. And this is our most recent example. And so here's a classic case where we did our level best to design the intersection, but this is not a standard intersection for us. But this is a case where we had two right turn lanes here at Broadway and Williams crossing the bike lane. So here we have the bike lane, but it's going forward, going through. In the right turn lanes, you have the dual threat phenomenon that could cause us problems. So what do? We had through green arrows. That's definitely in our toolbox today. In this case, we added the bike signal sign, a part-time restriction sign, and then we put the bike signal on recall. But we also, to enhance this a little bit more, there we go, we have this signal. We made this yellow, so it stands out just a little bit more. We put in an overhead sensor, like I showed with the other detection. We were trying that out. And then we were doing some future loops back upstream of the intersection that would predict when a bike is going to be here. So we give an advance message to this intersection to make sure we bring up the green indication here. Now, one of the things that we still have to address is we have this standard of, these are the signal heads. This is a bike signal head mounted at 17 feet 6 inches. Is that the right appropriate scale for bikes that are standing right here? Probably not, but that's our current design standards for these sorts of things. But at least we got this display, and I think I would argue with anyone that this is as clear as we could possibly make it. And our problem with this intersection moving forward is only enforcement. And so we're actually exploring whether we need to do a red light running camera as well, in addition to all these other things. So all these various elements pulled all together, really it's a foundation for research and experience. But a lot of these examples are coming from Europe. And we're using that as a way to transform our signals from where they are today to where we want to try to get to try to provide for that mode split goal that we're hoping for. But here's an example. This is just commonplace in Europe where you have a bike indication. Whereas Portland, if you talk to folks on the national scene, we'd be seen as kind of, well, they're doing something funny with that. I don't know. It's not in the manual, so we're not going to do that. But it's a distinctly different. And then having a yield sign in addition to this, well, that would be termed very confusing, and we wouldn't do that in the U.S. Now, there are other examples. And again, this is where having that perspective of traveling to Europe and seeing what they do, a lot of these things are just commonplace for the left turns and the way they use striping, thinking about not only bikes, but also motorized scooters and different users. And this is a good example of a cross bike here, where they have a variety of different markings, including yield markings at the intersections. And again, this looks like that intersection of 2030, but this is something that in Delft you see this often with a sort of bike box configuration here, bike indications, a one-lane travel approach. So there's various elements that you would experience if you were there and had that ability to go tour around. This element here is actually all wayfinding signs, and these are specifically bike wayfinding signs. We think about striping one lane and the fights we have with bike lanes, well, this is a good example where they have two bike lanes on an arterial street because they have a little more vehicle traffic in this instance. So some concluding thoughts. I'm excited to take your questions. So we got to think about transportation a little bit differently and to meet our goals. Think about that 25% mode split for bikes. It does force you to think differently than we are today, and wanting to have flexibility in design standards, whether it be federal, state, or even local levels, and then embracing innovation. We got to do things differently than we've been doing. Vehicle traffic needs have to be balanced. You think about the highway capacity manual that very focused on level service for motor vehicles as opposed to all the community interest in addition to just that level service C or level service D standard that we have. And then research being vital to the effort. We need research to continue to move us forward. And with that, I'll just thank you for your time. Chris, do you want to help me? Yeah. Oh, sure, there's got to be one or two. Come on.
Happy to start. So there's a lot of chatter among local activists and stuff that the I'm not sure if it's for Portland or Oregon or both, but the budget split for transportation is less than 8% for bicycles and much more. And I'm wondering, I haven't fact checked that, but has that hamstrung you at all? And are you meeting a lot of resistance in terms of, I know the green paint's expensive or whatever. I mean, when you go to the powers that be with a plan saying we want to put a bicycle in or a bicycle signal in here, some green paint, et cetera, how that whole process works.
I think that's a great question. I think the great question in terms of equity, in terms of are we spending enough? And so, an argument could be that, I'm sure the advocates, they're thinking that if you want to get to 25%, why aren't we spending 25% on bikes? And that's something that I think is a relevant question. I think the flip side of that is we should be spending as much as we have ridership, to justify. So keep matching with what we have. I think with all those numbers and budget items, we tend to get into silos. And now that I'm on in government, when you think about my signals, my budget, it's not really well defined of what part of my budget is for bikes. How much of the streetlight budget is for bikes? Well, 8%. Right? It's everybody's paying this amount, so I think looking through the numbers, it's hard to really get a handle on it. I think the more important thing is, do you feel like at the policy level, at the top level, that there's the intent to spend more? Because when we start to let the accountants try to figure out exactly what we're spending, well, my next signal, is it a bike signal or is it a bike project, or is it, is there a bike lane? Well, what percentage of the road is allocated for that sort of space? You can get kind of caught up in the numbers. I think the more important thing is broad level. Do you believe that the policymakers are devoted the right amount of energy into your mode of choice? And I think ultimately, if you read into those documents, you'll see that Portland is moving in the right direction. And whether we're spending 5%, we're spending 10%. It's somewhat of we're opportunistic in some cases. And with transit, we're always going to be spending. If you look at light rail projects, in those years that we get those big influx of federal dollars, it's always going to be very focused on transit. Oh yeah, got the mics there.
So the signal timing downtown, it seems like it works absolutely fantastic for pedestrians and for cars, for slowing everybody down. You've got a signal on every block. What happens as we go farther out to the main streets that are farther out in Portland? And I'm thinking 82nd Avenue, I'm thinking Foster Road, MLK. They don't have, they're two-way. They don't have signals anywhere near as frequently, but these are heavy pedestrian, classified as main streets. What are the solutions for those areas?
Well, I think the solution is really, it starts with land use, right? An engineer saying it starts with land use is kind of a cop-out. But, You think about 82nd Avenue. I mean, it's you got to have good places to walk to generate enough interest in walking. So that sort of thing, I think it truly does start with land use. Though we obviously can do certain things for retrofitting intersections to try to address that. I think it also starts with speeds. If the speed limit on any facility is 45 miles an hour, you got to think that the walking environment's not going to be conducive to encourage that sort of behavior. And so that's where I would start is land use, the speed limits, and how we think about the various urban environment elements. But I went to grad school at Texas A&M University, where they've said use the 85th percentile speed to set the speed limit. Well, that's kind of like saying, just come on up to the all-you-can-eat bar and just keep eating because we don't have an obesity problem. I think so we got to think about what our community values are, and in some cases we have to look at reducing the speed limit to try to address those sorts of needs. But yeah, we're looking at, of course, rapid flash beacons as kind of the low cost, and then the half signals are out there, and the hawk signals to provide those important pedestrian crossings. So those sorts of things are definitely in our toolbox for coming up with solutions for those more difficult intersections. Yeah, right here.
So the hybrid signals, what was the justification to actually remove them from intersections?
The hawk, you mean the half
hawk,
signals?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Half signals? That's a good question. When they were going to do the research, it was NCHRP 562 was the research. Actually, I was still a consultant, and I was talking with some of my former colleagues that was doing the research at Texas Transportation Institute, and I thought they had a scope item to do that, and to look at what was the difference in comparing whether it was a hawk signal or hybrid beacon versus the half signals, which was more appropriate. And what they ended up with was, well, we already know that the half signals are less safe. And I said, well, where was the research? Was there some documentation on that? And I still am not sure I've found that research. So we're doing some research right now to try to document the Portland experience. And I think Seattle should be doing the same thing, because they're actually building these, and there's some liability issues associated with them for creating new ones. Our existing ones are grandfathered in. So I don't know the answer to that question. It's a very good one. Yeah.
Yeah, and just as a follow-up, my student has not found any published work on that, so.
I was afraid of that.
Do you think that there's any chance that the MUTCD would ever be abolished and replaced with something that would be more flexible?
Let's see, that's two questions, actually. No, I don't think the MUTCD, the MUTCD is a great document. It really does provide a set of standards for us that we can use. I think a lot of it is left to interpretation, and that's the aspect I think that's very important is how do we interpret it? I think about, if I am interpreting it, everybody's selfish, right? So it's like the hawk signals. We are told that we have to provide a certain period where the flashing red for the vehicles is on at the same time as the flashing don't walk, which is somewhat counterintuitive to us. So we don't do that. We said we're not going to compromise. We think that compromises safety, or has the potential to compromise safety. If somebody that sees a countdown pedestrian timer of 10 seconds, well, most people will, especially if you're jogging, will run out because they think that the other street is stopped. Well, in reality, that's not happening at that intersection if you follow the manual. So we always think if we follow our hearts in terms of safety, how we can be the safe as possible, we'll be in good shape. And we think about safety first in terms of pedestrians as opposed to vehicles. So pedestrians, most vulnerable users, as opposed to people driving, and where they're surrounded by a pretty good buffer between them and maybe another vehicle. You got an airbag. I haven't seen that pedestrian airbag yet. So, I think there's that survivability of crashes question that we think about things in terms of pedestrians and cyclists first, as opposed to safety safety of paramount importance for somebody in their car. Now, that's not to say that that's not important, but it's just pedestrians are certainly more vulnerable, and the deaths that we've had this last year in the state are a good reminder of that.
What influence does if a Portland resident identifies an unsafe intersection or street, what influence do they have to call someone up and ask for a signal or for safety improvements?
There's a phone number, hotline phone number, 503-823-SAFE, S-A-F-E. We get a lot of calls on that, and so there's been a little bit of a backlog. We don't always get to those. But we do. Everyone gets recorded, and when funding comes available, we actually sometimes we've contracted some of those out when we've gotten the backlog too high. The ones at Signals come directly to me and my group, and we've actually been pretty fortunate. We've been able to respond to most of those because at Signals, it's with unsignalized intersections, you get a lot of complaints from people that are on the side street and feel it unsafe. And it's always a conversation of, well, is it really unsafe? Is it, we can't do, we have 1,070 signals, we have 10,000 or some odd unsignalized intersections. So it's a scalable problem for Signals. And Signals, obviously, there's a lot of activity at them. So we're pretty responsive at Signals. So 823-SAFE is the number to call, though. Yeah, we've been, New York City has been exploring, they call it a mixing zone, where it's the right turn or a traffic that's going to be in that curb lane that's going to make a right turn is given yield teeth, and the bike lane goes forward, and it's a mixing zone. It just allows bikes and vehicles to mix in a little bit wider lane. So that's an alternative to bike boxes, a little bit different solution, but one that we've been talking about recently on the Broadway cycle track as a potential next step. Yeah.
So when we look at intersections like MLK and Killingsworth, for example, where it is signalized, but there's still danger. There's still people getting hurt. Is there anything else that we can do with the signals? What are the next steps, or is it more land use or?
Oh no, at Signals I can do. We can do a lot of things. I think the question becomes, what is the specific issue? Is it a pedestrian issue? Is it so? I think the detection. I gave some examples of the detection that we would perhaps implore. The leading pedestrian interval is a great example of something that allows pedestrians to establish themselves at the intersection. We've got some things in our toolbox. Sometimes it's a issue of congestion, and so we do want to try to mitigate that congestion. People tend to take risky movements when they are trying to get through the signal, and if there's not enough green time, then that's something that we definitely will look at on a case-by-case basis. Our problem with safety is that we don't know the unsafe location, so we rely on the public to tell us when they're feeling like there's a change that could be made. Yeah.
So I'm always curious about the influence Portland has outside of just Portland, and then also, what comes into Portland. So you mentioned New York City as being another city you're looking at, but I'm wondering, who your office or you are getting calls from outside of Portland, other cities, and if there are any surprises in that list, if there are certain cities that you never would have expected a call from, and I don't know, somewhere in South Georgia, they're calling you up and asking you questions about these sort of like innovative solutions.
I think it's some of the more typical ones. Well, I guess the biggest effort that we're undertaking right now, it's Rob Birchfield and Roger Geller. They're doing the Cycling for Cities effort with NACTO, the National Association of City Transportation Officials. And that's kind of the major cities, Minneapolis, New York, there's a bunch of different ones on there, San Francisco, Chicago, the major cities. But we get calls all the time, from various folks asking about a variety of different things. Streetcar, I didn't talk too much about transit. I should have. Feel like I left Dave out here. transit, of course, streetcar is a big deal across the nation, so there's a lot of interest in that as well. But so probably the last one I talked to was a guy from Madison, Wisconsin, about what we're doing with the bike boxes, and they've been exploring a similar sort of treatment. But they're looking at doing red instead of green, and that's kind of interesting. It's like, well, I think we've kind of led that a little bit, and you hope that's one where the standards can be a really good thing. So if somebody is driving in Portland and then they go to Madison, they would see and go, okay, I understand what that is because I've seen it before. I think, and the problem with that though is, and I'll argue against myself, is that manual, that same kind of mindset is, we've used that for the flashing yellow arrows as a good example of how we want to do that. But like the half signals, those people on the side streets, those are 99.9% local traffic or something that's just lost. So, the need for uniformity in those, I think that's a little bit weaker argument. Sam? Mike?
Actually, I would like to know your idea about the signals that they use countdown in terms of safety and performance of that intersection, because I know that there's some countries in Europe that use it, and especially my country. What difference does that make, in terms of safety?
For vehicles or for pedestrians?
Vehicles.
Yeah, vehicles we have not done that, although there's some movement afoot. With the Connected Vehicle Initiative, the US DOT is doing, is actually providing that information in your vehicle so that the signals would know how much time is left and they would be communicating that. And then if it's, they knew your position in your vehicle, they could actually stop your car for you if you were choosing not to. It's kind of the big brother magnified in your vehicle. The challenge with that is that, and we've been installing, through a grant, we've been installing pedestrian countdown timers everywhere. And so drivers are picking up on that. And actually, I had the former director of transportation, Vic Rhodes, call me just yesterday. He asked, with those countdown timers, I'm wanting to use those as I'm driving through, but they're not going. It's not going yellow when it goes 0. And it's like, well, it's because those intersections are on sensors, right? We're trying to figure out the best time. So if you use a countdown and you start to say 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, you can't say, oh, I need 1 or 2 more seconds because it's not safe for the pedestrian's still in the intersection, or if somebody's still in the intersection, I need that additional second. So there's some trade-offs, some negative disbenefits of using those, of providing information or using that. So sometimes it's better not to have the information. There's been some research on that, but I don't know if I think that behavior changes over time. So there's some questions about that. Yeah.
I guess they're all.
I'm very appreciative of the work the City of Portland is doing to spearhead new ways of controlling traffic for bicycles and pedestrians. So I just want to say thanks to you and to all of your supervisors that are making this happen so we can all enjoy it. And I'm wondering what's in the lineup for the next couple of years. What sorts of things are you going to apply for exemptions from the MUTCD to make things better for bikes and pedestrians?
Oh boy, that's a good question. Put me on the hook. I don't have anything really that comes to mind right at the top. I think we're pretty happy with what we've been doing. We have a lot of efforts that are essentially going on associated with the Cycling for Cities initiative. So there's some areas in there that they want to explore, and there's a lot of the questions about speed limit that come to mind. But probably the most current one that it's a little bit of an axe to grind is the half signals, because we have 46 of them in Portland, and if we think about the replacement value of those, it's almost $5 million. It's not something that my budget can sustain. It's not something that's really a priority because they seem to be working pretty well as they are. So, in the interest of sustainability, sometimes being sustainable means just maintain what you got and being happy with that. So I think that's something that we want to look into, is how those different standards are affecting us. But the other part of that is, here's a good example. So with new federal investment, Federal Transit Administration, light rail project, right? we are mitigating traffic impacts associated with that project. So trying to make transit more competitive, but at the same time make sure we don't impact vehicles and vehicular traffic. So it's kind of from a competitive standpoint, we're not encouraging more people onto transit. So it's a little bit of a subtle detail, but at the same time it does drive some of the expenses that we have on that project.
How about one more question?
Good.
Thank you. Building off some of the earlier questions, just how do you think average citizens in helping you identify problems can frame them in a way that resonates with engineers and planners and politicians? And do you see opportunity for ordinary citizens and organizations to get involved in more specific solution designs, and so on and so forth?
Great question. I had Matt Piccio, I forget, I don't remember the pronunciation of his name, but he sent me, he had an experience at North Montana and Rosa Parks at the signal there, southbound, and he wrote this elaborate, amazingly convincing page, and then had basically a picture, showed exactly what happened and why, and I mean, it was very compelling. We're making the change this week. So, I mean, so I don't know if he's a citizen. He's a pretty smart guy. Average citizen, right? I think most average citizens can make a difference if you frame it up. I also had a call from a guy that, well, I hit this curb and I was driving, and it's like, well, he was trying to explain it to me, but you got to know the location, you got to know what time it was, you got to know some of the basic details for us to help you. Because if we can't see the problem, if we can't look at our data and match, then it's hard for us to act on it. So I just say, yeah, I think an average citizen can relate that, and you don't have to write a page and a half and have a full diagram to really make your case. I'll be around afterwards if you have further questions.
Do you want to make a pitch for your Netherlands?
Oh, sure. One of the things that, so as adjunct, we have, as an engineering student, I never thought about European experience. So when I was in your shoes, I saw those study abroad programs as somewhat of a flippant thing. And we started talking, actually, I was in Delft, Netherlands last year, and Peter Firth, who some of you may have heard speak here last year, probably, with Northeastern University, has a program. And so we started talking at the Transportation Research Board meeting, and he said, well, yeah, he has a program that takes 20 students to Delft and shows them what Boston should be like if he had his way. And so I visited him, saw the program, and said we should be doing that at Portland State. So we have a proposal through the study abroad program. The application is due April 1st, but it's a 2-week program to look at engineering solutions, and should be a very exciting program with Northeastern University. So all the hard work is done. We just got to go attend and join up with Northeastern. So it should be very exciting.
And you don't have to be an engineer, right?
No, it's really, I mean, we'll talk about engineering applications, but he has like a wide range of students. So he had economists last year, planning students, engineers. I mean, it was a really great, diverse group, and that's part of the fun.
Okay. And before we thank Peter for his presentation today, the next speaker, which is the last one of the spring quarter already, I can't believe that, is my student just finished, is going to be presenting her thesis, Christy Gladhill, on safety in urban forms. She now works at Metro in their modeling group. So thank you, Peter, for your presentation today.